Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Stories Around Azeroth. With myself, Titans Creed, and joining me as always is the lovely and brilliant, talented gnome of Azeroth himself, one Mr. Frazley. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to be here, ready to talk World of Warcraft and some amazing things that are coming into the pipeline.
That's it, isn't
How
it?
are you doing?
I'm
Yes.
good. Yes, no, I'm very good. Busy day itself, but working out everything itself. For those of you who aren't sure of what we do, we are here to talk about our adventures in Azeroth itself, and we'll pick up some unique, maybe interesting stories that have happened around the web, and then maybe a news story or two if it's interesting, I guess. I think that's the thing. So, I mean, why don't you get started, Frazley? How have your adventures around Azeroth treated you this week?
Really good. I have thankfully not died yet, so I am up to, let me just make sure I'm getting it correct. I am up to 21 now on Dwarf. So, no, halfway to 21. So I'm almost 21, which is the dreaded, that's where my last iron died. But so far I'm doing good. I'm feeling confident. I'm going to go into it tonight and see how far I can get. And I think I might finally get past 21 so I can drink. Oh no, I probably shouldn't drink, because if I drink then I probably will die and like not know where I'm going. But yeah, it's been good in a lot of that way.
That's brilliant. So this is your iron dwarf, yeah? The
Yes,
WoW challenges
my,
thing.
Third iron.
Third one. I always forget. Does the WoW challenges, is it only like 1 to 60, or is it count all the way from 1 to 120 now?
all the way to 120. So
Ooh.
it's yeah, there were some quests I've done. I forget what I was doing in BFA, but I was doing this one quest was like, oh, this would not be so good on the iron.
I mean, are you restricted to just leveling itself? Like,
Yes.
I mean, I know you can't do dungeons and you can't do group content, essentially. But does that mean, like, say when you get to Warlords, the best things to do is to go pick up treasures and do the bonus objectives? Can you do that?
I think you can do those. I need to double check because I've got the WoW Challenges rules.
Mm-hmm.
There are specific things about Warlords that you can and can't do, and I'm just double checking. Okay, things like the level 2 barracks are not allowed because of the bodyguards,
Mm-hmm.
and there is like you're not allowed to brewery, but it does sound like the other things are allowed. Like, I'm not seeing anything that's saying that you're not allowed in.
So
Warlords.
the safest thing in Warlords would be to go and get all the treasures then. I mean, you're going to have to buy yourself some new white gear when you get to Legion. But, I mean, Legion and BFA is where that stuff's really going to hurt anyway.
Yeah, and you aren't allowed the XP potion, the one that you showed me.
Obviously,
so.
yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so you're happily plodding through. You're still in Westfall on that at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, each time I'm going through, I'm learning what can I safely do and survive. And right now, Wetlands and Red Ridge are on my, I will try in the future list, but I'm not going to do it. I am going to be very stupid and go into Darkshire, so.
Darkshire, yeah. Why not? I like the questing in Darkshire. I mean, the only thing you'll have to be careful of is Stitches. That'll be
Yes.
the biggest thing to worry about. But he's no longer elite, I think. So, don't know.
And-
At least you don't have Mauladim as a roving elite anymore. Like lots of changes about Darkshire compared to Classic.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, you're right. I forgot about that roaming one. And many no mages died to that.
Many people died to that. I remember dying to that back in the Classic days as well. Yeah, well, it's good to hear that's going well. Anything else have you been working on?
I can't remember if I was doing this last time, but Korlak is 113, so I'm slowly getting Korlak up to 120. Oh, and I did run ICC with some people from stream. That was fun. It was like
that's cool.
Someone was like, "Hey, do you want to run ICC?" I was like, "Sure." We did it. Had a good time. No invincible, but one day that'll happen. But
One
other than
day that horse will drop.
Yes.
It's
the
good.
same way that I've got the Fiery Warhorse and the Blue Proto Drake. Those are my 2 claims to Mount Fame.
Nice. I won't tell you what I did to get that blue proto drake back in the day, or even the blue drake from Oculus. Oh my god, bad memories. My adventures for Azeroth have led me to... My monk is currently 39 Azerite power away from getting level 50 on the Heart of Azeroth. 39. Wow. I just haven't had a chance to do my daily emissary today. I'll probably finish it after we're done here. Otherwise, my Horde mage, who literally got through Vol'dun and just started Nazmir when we last spoke, has since done all of Nazmir, done all the main storyline in Zuldazar, and has finished all of the Zandalar Forever storyline now. So it's currently rep gated with Honor Bound and Zandalari Trolls before we can actually progress through the war story to get Mag'har Orcs and Zandalari Trolls. I'm also just at that level thing at the moment, so... But it's fun. I do want to talk about that story on the Horde Zone. Like, Vol'dun,
yes,
really, really good. Nazmir, I had weird things going into Nazmir. Like, it felt too dark and gloomy and everything else. But once you actually get to, I think, Bon Samdi's area, like, everything just flows really quickly. And it feels like a zone that brings everything together, a bit like Vol'dun. Like, you're always on a given path. There's the odd quest here or there, and the same in Nazmir. But you're always on the straight path. Now, when it comes to Zuldazar, it feels a lot like Stormsong Valley. You know, where the main story takes you through half of the zone, and then the other half you've got, like, all the little camps and bits and pieces to finish off and everything else. That's what Zuldazar feels like. But because the stories of all three Zandalari continents bring everything together, like going from Vol'dun, where you unearth the Mithrax, to going to Nazmir, where you merge the lower, to going to Zuldazar, where you find out about Zol's betrayal and get the rest of the other lower, and then for the story to come together in Zandalar Forever, it feels like it works out really well. I mean, you've got that goes into, you know, why we go into fight Gahun and everything else. And then you take it against the Alliance stories, which is not so much everyone like a whole overarching story, because the overarching story is unite the Kultirans. That's the overarching story. But we've got Drustvar, which is defeat the witches, and then there's that whole story about the Shadowlands with, you know, which is resolved in the dungeon until, you know, the Shadowlands are going to pop up in the future, because it's going to be something else to do with Bon Samdi and Vol'jin and the Lich King and the whole death thing and everything else, which is what I think is going to be the next story after BFA. It'll be all around the whole Shadowlands and death and everything else. I think that's where we're going. But then you've got the other story about Stormsong Valley, which is about N'Zoth and Azshara and, you know, the Shrine of the Storms and everything up in that half, and then you've got just dealing with small problems on the rest of it. And Stormsong Valley is all about mini stories as well, and there's nothing really cohesive there, except we do it all and then we get the payoff that's, you know, the big storyline with Jaina coming back into the Alliance, into the Kultiran and her family. It really feels like the Horde have got a really big story payoff on this time. Yes. And I don't know how I feel about that, having played Alliance for so long.
Yeah, because I still have not finished Zuldazar, but I can already see everything does feel cohesive. I need to go back and like finish the war campaign for the Horde, but I do like that the Horde are getting together because they want to go, and like you even have, would it be safe to say it, that we already have like the death of one of the people in the Horde leadership? I mean, this is in the storyline of 8.0. But there's a lot of intrigue already there. And yeah, the Alliance, we're just going in, saving different areas until finally, I had a little bit of trouble following some of the Alliance storyline. I saw it, but then I'm like, oh, Jaina's here. Oh, we're doing more stuff with Jaina. Okay, now I get it.
It just feels disjointed in comparison.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think we might have touched on this last week, but having one continent would have made the Gahun story feel better because everyone would have known what was going on, rather than the Alliance having nothing to see about any of that until we get told, oh yeah, your raid is to go and deal with the old god that's sleeping beneath Zandalar. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's not even an old god, it's just like bacteria that the Titans were playing with to see if they could carry out. It's not even a real old god, but even the quests talk about it being an old god and everything else, an old god contagion. And then, like, you get the Shrine of the Storms payoff now with the Crucible of Storms, but you know, as good as a dungeon as that is, it doesn't feel like it could have been. I feel like that bridge between Gahun to Battle of Dazar'alor, you know, and then you would have had that thing on both sides. But maybe if the story was changed for the Alliance side, where it was everything to do with the Crucible of Storms, you know, and having to deal with that. But now we've got the overall story of like, well, we've had more Naga stuff and we've had more Ajara, so it's like, but because everybody knows about Ajara and the Naga and the Old Gods anyway, we all know why we're going to Nazjatar. So it's... No, go ahead.
But I also see, because even today's topic kind of goes into one thing, Tierguard Sound has something that we're looking for, because the Mechagon in that vault in Tierguard Sound, we cannot underrate where the fact that there's a reason why we need to go back to the Mechagnomes. And I'm not just saying because I'm a big fan of gnomes, but there's something to do with they're trying to protect the world of Azeroth, and it's very interesting.
So do you think Mechagon is going to have more overall to the story they want to tell with the next patch than just an optional like Timeless Isle side thing to do?
I think it's more the patch after. The next patch's focus is Nazjatar and what we have to do with Ajara. But I think Mechagon has to do with something about the planet. Because I have, from the beginning of Battle for Azeroth, been thinking that it is not the Horde versus the Alliance. It's the planet of Azeroth. That we are abusing the planet and killing it. And I think as we head to 9.0, we're going to see stuff. Nazjatar finishes off the story of BFA. It finishes off what brought BFA, Ajara. It's finishing off that storyline, or at least continuing it. But we're seeing threads to 9.0 and beyond.
I'd agree. Like, I definitely think it's all sitting there. Again, I think 9.0 is very much going to be the Death Tales and everything else like that. Because the story already works around, like, it's already interwoven all the things, like everyone's afraid of Sylvanas and everything else and her ties to death. Lich King doesn't know why, like, who spoke to Vol'jin to put her there. Somebody hasn't got a clue. Somebody mentions about a boss. We hear about the Shadowlands, which is another death place and everything else. Which I think I'd have to check Chronicle, but I think it's meant to be, the Shadowlands are meant to be opposite to the Emerald Dream, I want to say. I'd have to go get my book to find out. It's over there in my cupboard.
And is the Twisting Nether where demons go?
Yes, the Twisting. Okay. There's a lot of things about everything, but a lot of people thought the Twisting Nether was what was between planets, but Twisting Nether is a dimensional rift all on its own, it seems. So, and that's where the demons went, and oh my goodness, it's talking about lore, and it's lore I haven't really thought about for a long time, because there's stuff like what's it called? So Netherlight Citadel, whatever it's called, the Priest Order Hall and the Warlock Order Hall, they're based in the Twisting Nether. The Warlock Order Hall being an old prison, and obviously the Netherlight Citadel Cathedral, I can't remember its last name, is obviously just a bastion that's sat there. So, but we look at it and we look, oh, it's in space, but it's like, I think it's like the Twisting Nether's meant to be the dark version of the Emerald Dream, where the Emerald Dream is everything that's untouched, and the Twisting Nether, I think, is everything that's been disrupted, broken, and everything else. But I'm not sure. They haven't really given it a proper classification. A lot of people still think it's literally the space between worlds. So anything that's like between here and Argus, between here and any other planets in Azeroth's system, that's all the Twisting Nether.
Because that was one of the cool things when Ali did Karazhan, and hearing at the end of Karazhan, that Karazhan, because of Sargeras' influence, became a connection point to the Twisting Nether. And that
Prince Malchazar, isn't it? He talks about it.
Yeah. And that made it really cool to be like, wow, Sargeras was in this palace, and then Sargeras was trying to use this to bring in demons and stuff like that, and connect with I'm like, there's a lot more that we don't even realize in the whole game.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff, like, literally between everything that we don't know about the game. We'll eventually get there, whether it's told through Crucible, side stories, or anything else. I can't find the exact voice line. There you go. All realities, all dimensions are open to him. There's a lot of stuff he says before you pull him as well. But it's interesting because I like to think... I think that the Twisting Nether is essentially space anyway, because that's how the Infernals travel, and they just come down like meteorites and everything else like that. But it's interesting to see how it plays a part altogether. And I'd be interested to see where it's going to go. Because obviously the biggest thing that lies in the Twisted Nether and beyond now is like whatever pockets of the demons, the Burning Legion still remain, and the Void. Which the Void is meant to be on the deepest outlies of space, you know? That's where all that meant to come down. But that's really, really interesting. But yeah, that's my adventures in Azeroth. My personal ones this week. I've been mount hunting, obviously. I've got 4 mounts that dropped this week. It was a very lucky week for me.
Nice.
We had 3 of the ones drop from Argus, and I've had Horadon drop this week. So I'm now 3 away from the big 400.
On one character, right?
Yeah, it's ones that can be used on one character.
Nice.
But we're getting there. It'll be nice to have that last 400, and I can just work on everything else. There's a couple of easily farmable ones, but I'm working on... Like, it's without trying to spend a lot of time just farming specific stuff, where I could just jump in, do my red ones and everything else. But yes. Anything else that you've had in Azeroth this week? Any other journeys and bits and pieces? I know you podcast around the world and obviously hear about everybody else's stories in Azeroth, so has anything piqued your interest?
Not really. I mean, just the stuff in the classic stress test was fascinating to watch. I'm not in the beta because I want to use my time for a while for live games, but it was interesting. Like Perfect Nomad sent me a tweet of the stress test of the gnomes.
Yes,
and it was just like a bunch of gnomes running around. I was like, that is paradise.
Yeah, they I mean, I had access to the stress test, but I didn't actually log on in the end. I tried. Everybody got hit by that wall trying to log in, and then it was just disconnected at the beginning, and it was just like 2 o'clock in the morning. Like it got to 3 a.m. before people started getting. And I was just like, I'm too tired for this. I can't hang around this long. And then I had other things to do the next day, so I kind of missed out. Have you actually got access to the actual classic beta then? Or
No,
is it
because
just
I
the
did
stress
not.
test?
Well, I didn't even opt in for the stress test.
Oh, you haven't opted in, right? Okay.
Because I basically neglected my BFA beta, and I figured I don't want to opt in for something that I might not use. I'd rather leave an invite for somebody else. I'm not trying to be like altruistic. I just know that I don't have the time to devote to WoW and a beta at this point. So the fact that people are getting a beta, I'm excited for all the ones who are loving it. Like I've been seeing Pat do the beta. I think Dust Mephisto done the beta. I mean, a lot of people are getting the beta, and I'm loving that they're having a lot of fun. And I also have been listening to the Countdown to Classic episode on Classic. I might have mentioned it last time, but I wanted to hear reactions to the beta. And it's cool hearing what they're going through, and that has been exciting for me, is seeing the excitement from people on all this stuff. And I heard about Failing Caverns, where it took like 4 hours.
Oh Jesus!
Or more to get to. I know.
Wait until they get Marauden. That'll be fun. Trying to clear all of that in one go.
Oh yeah, I remember like Dire Maul. I mean, I still remember when I came back for Kata in Dire Maul. I go into Dire Maul and I'm thinking, okay, I cleared out a couple hours for Dire Maul. You get done in 20 minutes. I'm like, this is not the place I remember at all.
It's not. There's a lot of the old world stuff which is quite interesting. I'm trying to remember if Dire Maul was available as one large instance but had its different entrance portals back pre-Cataclysm. I think it did. I think it was very much like Moralden. I know Scarlet Monastery was always broken up into 4.
Yeah.
I remember farming Graveyard at one point because it was just like, it's the Graveyard and it's the easiest one out of all 4 you can do. Hooray!
Do you remember doing the Mograine and like you get up to the final thing and then you have the tank who's just getting so tired that they pull everything and you wipe?
Oh, yeah, in Cathedral, yeah. I remember that. There are people that still do that today. Like, they just rush through and just want to just pull everything. This is... I mean... Let's talk about Classic, because obviously Warsong Gulch, and they've just opened up the Honor Path this weekend, and there's been a lot of people that are doing that, testing that. And a lot of people that don't realise that a lot of the wall clipping bugs that exist when you get feared, and you get feared through walls, and it's... People are reporting it as bugs, and it's like, no, that's how Classic worked.
Yeah.
The fake walls and everything else, and just if you clipped it at this point, you go through it. But I think it's going to be really interesting, like seeing the current player base that have played since. When did dungeon rushing really become a thing? I want to say Mists, because that's when we got challenge modes and timers and everything else. They're going to go back to this Classic. They'll be like, we could just bum rush the dead mines, it's fine. And then they're not going to realise that you have to CC certain mobs, interrupt certain mobs, not just let them get their things off. And you have to legitimately focus fire stuff down.
Yeah.
And it's going to be weird to see how these people legitimately play this game with that change.
For me, that's been one of the things I've enjoyed about the Iron is... I'm taking my time on things. I'm not just kill. Because leveling an alt in BFA is not... It's not like it was before they made the leveling change to 7.3.5. Back then, you basically were one hit killing mobs. But then BFA, it takes a little bit longer. But now in the Iron Man, I have to take time and everything. And that's only going to be accelerated in Classic. Or not accelerated. Emphasized even more that you have to take more time for every mob.
Yeah, plus, money's going to be more of a resource. There's been I'll tell you what, there's been a lot of conversation on the web this week about what people would like to see past 1.12 and at the end when Naxxramas is on farm. Now, a lot of there's a very clear divide. People are saying, well, will they do TBC servers? Will they do standalone TBC servers where people can transfer their Classic tunes to the TBC servers and do TBC instead of having to level all the way through, or will they just increase that? But there's been this small divide of people which have gone, well, will they do 1.13? Now, obviously there's a lot of lost content from Classic. We've got the Dragon Isles, and, there's all the other bits of things that we were going to get, but they chose not to do, And a lot of people are referring to RuneScape in this fact, where they go, well, will the devs turn around and see that a lot of people like the vanilla playstyle, and that they'll go, well, instead of just releasing content we've already given to people, and they know that, why don't we do new content in the vanilla stuff, and so that vanilla servers go to 113, they get the Dragon Isles, and there's this new content that's vanilla based for these people.
I want to touch on the Dragon Isles just real quick, because that actually was one thing that we talked with John Stats in the interview on Frazley.
Yep.
It was 73 or 79. But John Stats said Dragon Isles was a concept, but very unfinished.
Oh, absolutely.
If they do it, there will be a lot of work that will have to be done. One of the interviews that I think it was Jay Allenbrack said that they have really enjoyed Classic, and and if I understand right, he's also the one who said that you don't want Classic before he announced Classic. So I mean, he's come back on his thought, but he's been enjoying developing for Classic. If there's enough money, oh, go ahead.
I mean, here's the thing when it comes to something like that. I mean, and I think it's come up in the interviews with, like, it was one of the big recent interviews batches, I think. It was just like, they turned around and was like, they were more against Classic, mostly for the reason that the infrastructure wasn't there to be able to do it, because they wouldn't be able to launch an old server with it. And the reason we've got it at all is because one of the guys in their own time managed to get it to work with the current Frame network, which is good, which is why it works with the launcher, and it's why you got your Battle.net friends list and everything else. You know, it's small little things like that which are going to make the Classic experience better. But it's still one of those things. Like, if they did decide to do 1.13, go back and, you know, flesh out the Dragonars, their original plans for the Emerald Dream and everything else like that, because those files were still in there. You know, people could clip through Dead Mines and get to the Emerald Dream. All that stuff's all available on YouTube. You can go and find it. Yeah, the concept's there, but the problem is, how do they make it look like Classic when they're designing things that look like BFA?
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to go back with... I mean, they might do. They did it with Warlords, for example, before they decided they were going to give us flying, where they went back and designed things with Classic in mind, and the whole point where you can only see the mountain from certain angles. But if you manage to see it from without being in front of it, but up here, you'd see that it was designed as... I want to say paperwork would probably be the best idea to talk about it like that. But they might do that. It would save a lot of dev time in the fact... Well, I say that. I don't know how long the dev time would take. But instead of having to render out full mountains and everything else... Who knows?
Yeah, because Classic was definitely a lot more of a movie set in a way.
Yeah.
Because you
That's
only
a better way to
saw
say it, yeah.
what they wanted you to see.
Yeah, which I remember Stormwind City was a very good example. The Keep and the Cathedral, I think, were the big ones that were very movie set like in how they were done. Less so Orgrimmar and Thunderbluff. They were big. Just Thunderbluff specifically is just a big mountain, several of them. And
the Silvermoon City and Exeter are definitely examples.
Yes, because they're still not fixed. Yes, yes. It would be nice if they were actually brought forward and actually done up. But at the end of the day, no one uses classic cities anyway, so I mean, there's less urgency to get it done. But I don't know. Like, it's interesting. And what would you like to see? Would you like to see Burning Crusade servers, or would you like to see new content in the classic vein?
I could see both, because one reason that I don't want to go back to Classic is it won't move on. But if I could get new content that I didn't get, it would be interesting. Though I also never experienced the Burning Crusade, so I could say that there would be that part where it would be interesting to do that. Look, but not for me. The one thing that I'm struggling with, and philosophy-wise, because understanding the philosophy of people who are die-hard Classic is wanting it to be where it is. Adding stuff, you instantly take away from the Classic feel. I mean, there are bugs that they're not fixing because they want it to be Classic. And I've been in the camp where I've been like, okay, if there's a bug that they can easily fix that doesn't affect gameplay, I would be fine fixing it. But we're seeing a lot of things that they're not so to add content, I could see it making some of the diehards upset if they want it to be a time capsule of what it was. But if they want classic gameplay with new stuff, then that's fine. It would just have to be very careful to add it. And then would we be in like a multiverse? Would we be a thing where like the story is changing in classic compared to?
As I said, like a lot of people are comparing that idea to what RuneScape Classic did. Because in RuneScape Classic, and I don't know the 100% ins and outs of this, but RuneScape Classic turned around and they reproduced the original basics of the game for people to play. And then at the end of it, they had so many people that were invested in playing this, that they turned around and went, well, this is really exciting. We could keep this same vein and just add more content in this vein without, raising everything else. But that game's built differently. There's lots of different versions of endgame for that. There's different PvE endgames, there's different PvP endgames, and it works out that there's so much to do throughout the whole length of that thing. I mean, they'd have to essentially have a whole, essentially another expansion team. Like, I'm not entirely sure how the current things work, but to the best of my knowledge, they should have 2 expansion teams. One that would work on, so we've got one expansion team that's working on BFA, while the other ones are working on 9.0. And then once 9.0 is or once 8.3, 8.4 is done and out and polished, you'll have a small subset of bug teams, but the majority of that content team will go and work on 10.0. So, like, they probably have to get a whole nother team to work on 1.13 and whatever they want to do, But
yeah,
if they could quite easily do it, I think they could keep the PvP scene intact in vanilla, when there'll only be gear upgrades. There's no level changes for it. You introduce a new level of content and a raid that's, specific to Classic as well. That means that you then get people who might not have been interested in Classic because they don't want to play it again, interested in Classic because there's new content specific to those servers. It's a very interesting way to look at things.
And then they could explore ideas, and then I could see them finding a way to fit it into BFA in its own way, or what? Because they could make it where this raid will magically appear in BFA, but then you'd have to have another team. I mean, because that's where I am struggling with it.
So, I mean, you could have it where it'll just be a complete different AU, as it were, but you could have it where, say they do 113 and the Dragonars, for example,
Yeah.
You could then, in 9.0, have Alex Draza come back and say, like, there's, a rumoured old Dragonars that may or may not still exist or anything else, and we go and find something, and there may be hints that they placed there in the 9.0 Dragonars that's, they've placed, like, there's ruined versions of that we find newer versions of in Classic that have just degraded over, like, the span of, like, so many years, or were ruined in the Cataclysm.
That could work, because it's like Elder Scrolls Online in a way, because they are doing like Elder Scrolls Online is they just launched Elsewhere, they've done Vardenfell and stuff like that, and they have that 1,000-year gap to account for the fact that you're going to get certain things that will be different in each. And I'm like, enough time has passed, and especially with and the Cataclysm messed up a lot of stuff, that whatever is lost in BFA or the WoW that's progressing, if it's lost, it's lost forever.
It can work. There are ways they could, like, clue it in and everything else, but there's not ways to say that they can't do it. It's just a matter of doing it. Blizzard, if you want to hire me, if you're even listening to this, pay me. I give you ideas. I'm good with ideas.
Yeah, I loved your idea last week about alts. I mean, like, and I'm loving this idea. I mean, I'm not. Again, I've never been a Classic hater. I'm actually
absolutely not.
I'm excited for. But you've made me now more okay with the idea of an alternate content, because I kept wondering how would alternate content work. It could really work, and it would get me playing Classic.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
There you go. Now you see you've got to level up just in case you do get that 113.
Well, I know. Well, I'm already going to level up because I realized I can actually hopefully maybe play Ungaraged. I don't think I'll be able to ring the gong, but maybe with the server architecture, I can actually play Ungaraged. So
maybe
you will see me leveling on Classic.
I really do hope that they give us a decent idea of where the server architecture is going to be there. So it would be nice. I think with what the population is going to be, I think it would be really nice if we could play EU with US people. True, there'll be that whole time difference and everything else, but a little bit of freedom so we can actually play with our friends in this day and age would be really nice.
I think once we get cloud gaming, that could be the answer to regions, because if they are able to fix the latency between the things that you and I are connecting to a cloud computer, and they figure out the latency between those two data centers on that cloud database, then
to be fair though, with internet speeds the way they are, the latency's not that bad. Yes, I mean you'd probably be if I was to connect to you or you connect to me, there'd probably be about a 200 ping. 200's not bad. I played on EU with a 400 ping before, 450 ping. It's, you learn to compensate for it. And it did back then. I recall, because I was leveling mages and casters at the time, you actually had built into your UI ping monitors for your spellcast, so you could know when you would be able to hot press to get the next cast rolling.
Wow.
It's just that internet speeds have come so far that it's less of an issue these days.
And if you make it a choice of if the person wants to connect with you, then you're not forcing somebody.
I mean, let's be fair. The architecture already works. They do it with Overwatch. You can play with anybody for Overwatch.
Okay.
Heroes not so much, but Heroes really should have had it. But Overwatch already does it. Why can't we just institute this technology? Like, we need to move Final Fantasy, and I think Elder Scrolls do it as well, where you can actually choose what region you want to play on, like without having to buy an Oceanic or a United States or an EU key.
I think someone was telling me the way Blizzard has their BattleNet set up, they're separate businesses, so it is part of how it's not just the technology side, but like none of your stuff is technically bought on a U.S. account if you were to move to the U.S.
No, I get that, but we should get past that now, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm with you, and I think it would help a lot of the balances. It would fix a lot of.
I think it would remove a lot of the stigma of region locking, especially since so many people have played this game over 10 years. You know, technology's moved on and everything else.
Yeah.
But I'd like to talk about, because we've talked about Classic, which was something I wasn't actually expected to talk about today. I'd like to talk about a thread that I found on Reddit about a month or so ago, I believe it was. Yeah. And it's talking about, the actual thread title was on Reddit, and it's called Battle for Azeroth Story is really similar to Bionicle G1 Story, and it's going to end the same way. I think I also know what Battle for Azeroth really means. Now, it's rumor, theory, speculation, but it was a fantastic read. And one of the things I'd like to bring to the cast itself is a good story. And it looks, the idea of this Reddit thread, and I'll post it in the, at least in the description for the video version of the cast as well. But it's really good. The theories. You've had a chance to read this, haven't you, Fraz?
Yeah, and that's kind of like I was alluding earlier, that it helped me see Mechagon's true role in Azeroth, because it's not just going to these gnomes, but they are the keeper of Azeroth, and Azeroth is in trouble. Azeroth is hurting, and kind of reading through this, Azeroth might be maliciously being attacked by something. I mean, it would, because if N'Zoth is behind, it's saying that N'Zoth is behind a lot of things going on, and if N'Zoth was talking to Sargeras, or no, were they talking? Did Sargeras know N'Zoth? Because
so Sargeras' point was that he hates old gods. Like, old gods are part of the void. The void is destruction. His crusade was not to stop that corruption, but anything that the old gods and that void corruption lands on, the planet's doomed. So the only way to cleanse that corruption is to destroy the planet, to stop it inhabiting any sort of perhaps Titan world soul.
And he used the demons. He was first against the demons, trying to stop him, but then he used the demons
to do that. Yes.
Because he saw the planets being corrupted by the void in the old gods.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again. I had listened to a couple episodes of More of the Great podcast. It's a podcast I need to keep listening to because they're helping me go through the lore piece by piece, and I'm like, it's helping me understand this stuff. So it's Sargeras, in a weird way. I could see him having seen Azeroth being corrupted by the void, because he could have seen where it was starting to happen, and the sword could have been him trying to stop it or even try to hurt Azeroth, because he saw. Because what they're kind of saying is N'Zoth could at some point take the world soul out of Azeroth and take what's in there and replace it with himself. I'm like, I could see that. I could really see N'Zoth being the soul of Azeroth.
Yeah. So that's what a lot of the core of this speculation is essentially, for the most part of it, the gods of Bionicle and everything else, eventually the bad god pushed out what was a world soul in that story and inhabited it himself without the player characters knowing. Now, it feels along, because they just send the player characters out on quests to try and save the world soul in Bionicle and everything else, which is what we're currently doing. Now, we've seen on one of the stories that we do to help, I think it's the Exalted part of the Champions of Azeroth, where we use the power of the Heart of Azeroth to defeat that which feeds. I can't remember the name of the demon, because it was that which hungers, something along the lines of that name, and we feed it. We fend it off with the power of the Heart of Azeroth, which we put all this Azerite into, essentially allowing it to feed so it staves off the hunger and everything else. So essentially what this thread talks about is the only way that we're going to save Azeroth is that we're going to think that we're locking N'Zoth away inside the amulet, because it's gonna try and help. What we're actually going to do is we're going to put the world soul of Azeroth into the necklace, and that allows N'Zoth to inhabit the world soul, and we're going to get an old god titan, essentially.
Which would be fascinating. And now that's a big amulet if it can hold an entire world soul in it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, bearing in mind that it brings the Pantheon back as well, because we haven't killed Sargeras. He's just imprisoned with the rest of the Pantheon. It allows them to bring the Pantheon back in and be like, what have you mortals done? Why have you done this? You know? But, because it leads into a bigger, greater story about, because they're like, we put N'Zoth in, what we think is N'Zoth inside the amulet and fire it off into space, but then it could be that we have to go and find it. Like, 9.0 could be less about the Shadowlands and be more about, you know, N'Zoth is Azeroth now. N'Zoth is the parasite, and this brings around the rebirth of the Black Empire. You know, we might not go to Ny'alotha in 8.3. It might be another story, and Ny'alotha and the Black Empire might be 9.0. It's a really interesting story, and a theory. I'm just trying to... Yeah, because there's also, as you said, Mechagon was made to fix Azeroth, and there's also a Bionicle reference. We know Blizzard likes to do references to things. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if someone at Blizzard's story writing has kids that have played Bionicle, or they've played Bionicle themselves, and they've gone, this is cool. Not a lot of mainstream people are going to know Bionicle, because they're going to look at people who've grown up about my age. I'm 35 in a month. I don't know how old you are, Fraz.
29. Yeah.
29. Yeah. So I started playing WoW when I was 20, my 20s. You know, 19, 20. You've started playing when you were like 14, 15, something like that.
Yeah.
We're not going to have looked at a Lego Bionicle game at that point and gone, oh, I'm not going to play that. That's a kid's game. Because that's what we're like when we're that young, you know? So we're not going to know what a lot of this Bionicle stuff means, but there are going to be people who have played it. And there may be someone at Blizzard who's had kids that have watched it and played the game themselves. and got, something along these lines of a story.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
And there's nothing against taking a story as long as you're not plagiarizing. If you're taking an idea and adding your own spin to it, then it's good. Because the scary part would be if Blizzard was secretly taking the story. Oh no, subtitle. Blizzard is taking the story of
That's it, isn't it? But there are a lot of similarities between Bionicle lore and Warcraft's Titan lore, is what they're saying. I mean, Warcraft has changed their lore as they've seen fit to fit the story, which is what you have to do. You can't turn around and write a story and then never change it. It's why stuff in Chronicle Volume 3 turn around and retcon some of the older stuff. It's because they've had to change the lore of the world to fit the stories they need to tell.
Yeah,
it's like how they've already come out and said, when we get the remake of Warcraft 3, some of the storytelling will be different from the original Warcraft 3 because it's going to have to fit the story that they're telling.
And
because go on.
And no one is omnipotent enough to know where they want to take a story. Because if it was a story that was complete, then it would be harder to direct on it. But we are in a living story. The story is not done yet.
I think Blizzard, specifically with the story that they're telling, they're thinking 3 expansions ahead at least. And you can tell that this is something that came into mind. I don't think it's so much with Burning Crusade, because I don't think they really envisioned Garrosh was going to be the enemy of, the enemy we fight at the end of Mists until we got to Mists. But with Mists, they told the story of Garrosh getting the... So we've had from going to Mists to the Burning Legion, all in that trilogy of a story. And then the story kind of hard caps at the end of Legion with one extra thing that just leads into what we're doing next. So my theory is that they've got the story for 8, the story for 9, and the story for 10. Like, they know where they want to be in expansion 10, and then there'll be a hard cut with the story that they've got there, and there'll be these familiar threads which ties 10 to 11.
Yeah, it's the same thing that they've done with Star Wars, and I think 3 games or three media is a good logical step.
It's good. There's a lot of story. As I said, you really should read this yourself if you've got any thoughts about how you feel the story on the lore should go. It's interesting that this thread had so many upvotes on the Reddit, and I haven't really seen anybody talk about it. Like, I haven't seen Nobble talk about the possibilities on it, and he's the biggest lore guy that's currently out there. Well, with the exception of obviously the red shirt guy and everything else, but he's not very prolific in what I see, so he might have mentioned it, but Nobble, who is there with the rest of the content creators, doesn't talk about it. Bellular, who likes doing a lot of content on various bits and pieces and speculation anyway, didn't report on it or anything else. So it really strikes me that these sort of content creators haven't looked at this story and gone, well, for a start, there's content that can be made off of that, but they haven't thought about where this story could be, and it could be right. But I mean, I guess when it comes to this, we'll see at BlizzCon where 9.0 is going to take us, at least. Because
it would be cool to see a spaceship in like Mechagon. Like what if you unlock a door and there's this giant spaceship just like sitting there? Because space opens up to a lot of planets that we've never been to.
Yes.
And there's stuff they can create new content instead of trying to like talk about the lore on one content. And if we ever get into the engine issue of like the engine of the game being out of place, you could figure out a way to somehow work it together where, what if classic is old engine, or I mean old content and old graphics, modern WoW is here, then WoW 2.0 is a new engine, and your character stops here, and like, oh well, you can't use any of your mounts on this because they are only alive on Azeroth and Argus.
It would be interesting. Going to space also means that we can go back to Argus and see what what's changed. Like, have they managed to repair the planet in any way or anything else? There's a lot that we could go to. I mean, you only have to remember Star Augur from Nighthold. There are many, many planets out there. Some are void-ridden, some are Legion-burned, some are just not epidemics, but casualties to just how vast and horrible space can be. There's a lot that we could find there, but they'll obviously go to a specific planet or bits and pieces and everything else. But I feel when we get to BlizzCon, we'll definitely see. They'll definitely announce what 9.0 is going to be, or at least give us a name title, or like that normal trailer that we get in the lead up to it. And we'll definitely have a what's next panel for what 8.3 will contain.
Yeah. I'm already speculating. No,
well, we've yet to see what happens post Ashara, because what we've been told by Blizzard is that we'll know who the main villain is of the expansion by the end of that patch. So there's definitely more story to come, because they've only just on the PTR opened up the introduction lines and the bodyguards for Nazjatar. So there could be more rep-gated story that's down the line. I hope not, because we still need Revered in order to get flying. And God, Nazjatar and Mechagon already feel like a massive grind fest.
Yes.
It really feels like a massive chore. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where we're going to. I don't know. You got any plans for your next week of your adventures around Azeroth?
Definitely more of the iron, because I want to try to get my iron up and stuff like that. I'm trying to think like I might go onto my horde or try to get my shaman up to 120, because then I've got a druid. A lot of it's just kind of holding pace, because there's nothing that's calling to me in current content that I haven't really done. I mean, there's obviously things I can like rep out, like allied tradition stuff like that, but I'm kind of holding off a lot of my emissary stuff till I get flying. Once I can fly across BFA, world quests won't be quite so much of a pain. Like Legion world quests are not a pain once you can fly.
Legion world quests weren't that much of a pain anyway, I felt, because the flight points and where the world quests were situated weren't very far away, so you could literally land and you were right there. The problem with how BFA spread out is, particularly when you're a horde on Colteris, or when you're Alliance in Zandalar, your flight points are so sporadic. Now, you'll have your occasional flight points that land exactly where you need to be. For example, your Champions of Azeroth stuff is nearly right next to a flight point. That's good, because it's right there, and then you don't need to do anything. Because once you get your gear and you're just doing your dailies just to tick on your Heart of Azeroth, then that's really it. But no, I definitely feel that once we get flying, but it still feels like flying is going to be a chore. Flying, we say flying's... This is the interesting thing, because it takes us back to Classic again. Anything you do in Classic, you feel rewarded for at the end of that story. But because we're used to flying, we've had flying ingrained of us since TBC, Wrath, Mists of Pandaria, etc., etc. We want flying now. And to unlock flying, because it's going to be rep-gated, it feels like a chore rather than a reward. Now, as I said last week, if they tied it into Lore Master and Explorer, we wouldn't have to worry about Pathfinder, because we'd be like, oh, I've done Explorer and Lore Master on my main character, because I don't want to have to worry about doing it on my alts. I'll do Island Expeditions on my alts, or I'll do PvP on an alt, or I'll do something that I want to level that's different. But I already have flying if I choose to go and do world quests, because I've got Explorer and Lore Master. Hell, you could even tie the treasures into it now, because and make that part of Explorer. It's having Pathfinder in the middle of an expansion to allow us to fly back in content when we're not going to want to fly, except on alts to get them done. It's just a pain in the ass these days.
Yeah, I almost think that the expansion should just launch with Pathfinder. That once you finish the story, boom, you're done. And then Final Fantasy 14 did it interesting, like, because I know we're getting 2 new zones. Well, Final Fantasy 14, you explore the zone and you attune yourself to that zone.
Yes.
Then you can fly around there. So whenever they introduce it, yeah,
it's essentially it is Explorer and Loremaster, because a lot of those attunements are based around your story quests in those zones, but then there are at least a quarter, a third of those which you actually have to explore the zone to find.
Yeah.
So it's like, have Explorer, have Loremaster. If you want to tie the treasures to it, go ahead, because people are going to be wandering around getting their Explorer anyway. You really want to be a douche about it, you can tie the rares to it as well, because again, people are going to be exploring the zone just to get it unlocked. But then they've done the rares, they've done the treasures, they've unlocked all of the map. You then reward them with flying in that zone.
Yeah. Why do a rep grind?
Exactly. Like, why should I get rewarded for a rep grind, which is going to have no real rep rewards at Revered that I'm going to want to use anyway? By the time I reach Revered, it'll have gear that's not useful to me.
I almost wonder if there's somebody at Blizzard who is in charge of rep grinds and is afraid that, oh, if we don't give people enough content to do, or if we don't make people forced to play the game, that people will leave. I mean, and in the reverse, people will leave because of the rep grind.
That's been a thing since daily quests have been put in, though. Like, go back to when Trial of the Crusader was first put in, before we built the thing. You know, so we're still in Alduar. Your daily quests were go around the world and pick up materials so we can build the Colosseum. It launched at a time where content was dry because, you know, there were no quests to do, because we'd quested and we'd done anything. People were logging on to raid, they were logging on to do Wintergrass, they were logging on to do PvP. You know, it's one of those things that people were rewarded for the things they do. But now it's like bleh.
Yeah.
It's like we're forced to do these things. Take my mage, for example, and we talked about this a little bit last week. We're getting my ult and then being locked to these item levels. I'm now fighting the item level system on my mage in order for it to do anything, because I'm fighting, hoping for a glove reward above 300, because it's still at 292 level gear, before it unlocks my rare achievement and it unlocks the next item level tier. You know, I don't want to do dungeons because the personal loot system punishes me. I did a dungeon. I did a random heroic today on my mage. I didn't get any loot on anything except for the last boss, and the last boss dropped a 5 item level weapon upgrade. There's no reward.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's I got lucky with 1 item. There were people in that group that didn't get anything. It feels less. The problem is that it feels less rewarding, but there's a ton of content to do. And this is where I think Blizzard needs to find that. And I think they'll find it when they re-release Classic and they see people are doing quests and feeling rewarded for it. And I think the philosophy is going to change. But that's just me.
There was an interview where they said that they're going to learn from Classic and hopefully bring it into BFA. So I think bringing it into BFA
won't work. I think what they'll do is they'll look at Classic, because we're still going to have another 6 months before 8.3 launches after Classic launches, minimum. Which means that we're going to have another 6 months minimum after that before we get another expansion. So I'm not expecting an expansion till September, November 2020 at this point. So they'll have a year and a half from when Classic launches to retool any quest chains and anything that can make people feel rewarded from that Classic experience. And that's what I think they'll focus on.
Absolutely.
But yeah, final thoughts from you, my friend. I think I've talked more for both of us this time.
I'm with you on the things, because what you're saying is you're expressing some of the feelings I've been having and stuff like that, and I'm excited for where the game's going to go. And for me, I I'm never gonna say Blizzard's perfect because I'm not perfect. So if I'm not perfect, then Blizzard's definitely not perfect. How about you?
No, I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm definitely not perfect, but I have ideas that I'd like to see in the game, as I've expressed this week, as I expressed last week, as I'll probably find something that I'll want to express next week as well, or, you know, I'll just mention it off cuff on Twitter or somewhere else that I think that this could be a good idea. I'm not perfect, though, and a lot of my ideas will be wrong, and someone will disagree with that because that's not what they want to see. What I want to see is going to be completely different to what they want to see, and that's fine. Like, we're all full of ideas of what we want to see in a game that we've played for so long. We're invested in our characters. We've met friends in this game, new friends. We still talk to old friends, and we just want to keep playing something that we enjoy. And at the bottom line, if we can think of stuff that's going to make it better, but again, we're not on the inside. We don't see the corporate infrastructure of what they might have to deal with or anything else. And we don't know what the design philosophy is like. You know, we know what we're told, but we don't know what was actually there.
Yeah, and we don't know what ideas that they even thought about, because that is the one thing that I never want to say. I think we under credit Blizzard on some of their genius of all these ideas, trying to at least figure out what they think is the best. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's their game and they decide. But I think that they do listen and act on what we want. But every time I hear stuff, they are listening.
I think they are listening. They just find a hard way to implement what we want. And then when they get around to implementing what we want, it's either overshadowed by a bad decision or a decision that hasn't gelled well with the community, or they haven't implemented it the way we want it.
Absolutely.
The game, I have to say, is currently not casual friendly, as much as they've tried to push it, because they're trying to do too much of it. I think they need to step away from world quests. They need to step away from the garrison table. Like, they've already tried to make the garrison table more casual friendly by massively reducing the rewards that we've had from the previous two expansions. But we need to have more stuff that invests us. Like, if there's more long time content to get involved in, like long storyline quest stuff that is like, go away and farm X of an item, come back, and then you get the next step of a quest line and everything else. And various other bits. Yes, there'll be people that'll feel like it's just a grind, but then there'll be people that'll feel like they're invested for getting all this stuff as well. But we need to, like, remember back in, oh my goodness, there was a time that Blizzard was hammered over content gating. Time gating. When everything used to be, because everything was rep gated when we were in Mists. And then they went from rep gating to time gating, and now we've gone from time gating to back to rep gating again, you know. And it's just there's no in between. It's either far on one side or far on the other. Like, we could have that, and they've tried to ease off the rep gating by going, your war campaign happens at 3k honored, 7k honored, you know, into revered. But then what they've done to slow that down is they've time gated us by saying, well, you get 75 to 150 rep a world quest. It's, you know, it's not pleasant, and that's alleviated by the pain of emissaries. But we're time gated on emissaries by getting one a day, and I think someone put it best when they were talking about how the Throne of Thunder did content, and you could go there and you could choose if you wanted to do PvE content or PvP content on that day and everything else, and just give us the emissaries. Like, if we're there, we've got stuff to do. Like, it's very hard. Like, the content needs to be there, and the content needs to be overwhelming. Like, if you wanna rep gate a storyline, then rep gate it so that finishing one part gives me a large amount of rep to get me to the next step, but then be like, we need to go away and work out another plan, and then have a couple of days break, because that would make sense for a character to go away for 2 days and come back and go, we've got this plan, you know, it's there to do. And that way the character feels invested, because they can do their own thing in a couple of days, but then they've got the rep for the next step. And there's a nice middle ground there. Like, what's the point in me going back to Nathanos, going over to go and find the next part of the war campaign? I get back off that and I got 150 rep. Cool. You've asked me to go and do this big job on the other continent and you know, sneak in and attack an alliance base, but you'll give me 150 rep. At least turn around and go, well, you've done this massive job. You've really gone up in our standings. You know, here's that rep. Now, we're just going to have to go away and we're going to have to work out the next step of the plan. Come back in a couple of days.
Yeah, versus every day having to come back and be like, okay,
yeah,
getting that much closer. Because, like, I'm thinking right now, I think I'm going to go and work on my horde. Because my horde's in that place where it's in limbo. And I'm like, I got to figure out where do I do world quest now? Or do I do the war campaign?
That's it. Like, thankfully, because I've already finished the Alliance story on my main character, my ult is just there to do... It doesn't need to do world quest because no loot is going to be good enough. But it will log on, it will do an emissary, and then I'll disappear to another character. But at the moment, my horde is like, well, I'll log on and... Oh, there's a world quest for a bit of gear there I can use as an upgrade. I'll go and do that. And I don't want to grind out I don't want to grind out world quests for the next hour and a half just to try and get a measly amount of rep. I'll just wait for an emissary to come around in whatever day that turns up and just chunk it down. But I'll have to go back to my garrison table and do the rep missions to try and get the rep up. There needs to be a nice middle ground, and that's the case that Blizzard need to hit, because at the moment they're just hitting too much of an extreme.
Yeah, because I think they're afraid again that we're going to unsub, and in a way, some of us have unsubbed because they forced us to unsub versus
people unsub because there's nothing to do in their eyes. There's lots to do. You just got to find what you want to do. You know?
Yeah.
We didn't spend 10 to 15 years playing a game because there was nothing to do. We spent 10 to 15 years playing a game because we were playing it with other people. You know, there's lots of other games that we're in a very nice situation where there's lots of other games out there to play.
Yeah.
But Blizzard needs to get us to want to play that game. So
absolutely.
Even if they turn around and went not massive, great big rep chunks, but they have a storyline which happens and we get 500 rep. 500 rep. Excuse me. 500 rep and a small step in a quest chain. That would be massive. That's a long quest chain that we could complete every couple of days, you know? And then you can still keep your emissaries in there, massively reduce the rep gain, you know, or give it for the reps that aren't your main, like, warbound rep or anything else, and just make it fun. I don't mind jumping on and doing an emissary if they turn around and go, yeah, we've got some... You want to help us out for a day? Brilliant. We've got these things that need doing. You know what? It can take place of doing every couple of days. There's a big new war quest. You know? There just needs to be... I'm rambling on about it, but there just needs to be a nice middle ground.
Absolutely. And I'm with you on that. That it can't force you to away from the game, because I mean, if it wasn't for podcasting and some of my streaming, there's a part of me that could be tempted to be, I don't know, and I hate to say that, but I mean this stuff is what's keeping me into WoW some days. Absolutely.
I'm jumping on WoW at the moment and doing mount hunting when I'm rendering a video or I'm downloading a Twitch VOD to edit up and put online somewhere else. You know, it's just stuff that we're working on in the background. But it's a very different game than where it was 10 years ago, and we'll be interested to see where Classic turns around and does it.
Absolutely. And we'll be gnomes in space.
Yes, gnomes in space. Absolutely. But I think we're pretty much at the end. I think we've overgone our hour just a tad. So thank you very much for listening. Mr. Frazley, where around the internet can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Frazleytastic, and then you can find me and everything and all the podcasts, including this one, at Frazley.com.
Brilliant stuff. You can find me at Titans Creed on Twitter. You can find me on Twitch, on twitch.tv/Project Phoenix Productions. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Project Phoenix Productions. Those are the best places to catch me. I do a variety of content every day. Mr. Frazley does a variety of content nearly every day as well. You can catch him on many podcasts. You can catch him on Twitch. Same as me. I'm not on many podcasts, but I'm everywhere on the internet these days, it seems. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. From me and from Frazley, I hope you've enjoyed sitting down and talking to us about some stories. And we'll be back next week with hopefully some more stories around Azeroth. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.